Welcome to the Creative Plan Podcast Network. Join us as we share our favorite RPGs, one-shot games, tabletop games, reviews of items, and convention panels, and other exciting things that we run into from time to time. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, a Sign to Ragnarok story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and rpgpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
Okay, it's quarter after. I guess we should start.
So are these my notes?
Those are anybody's notes that wants them to be. Are you moderating, Jim?
No, absolutely not. I'm not going to attempt to modulate four beautiful young women.
Yeah, but what a man you would be if you could. You fed me that.
Oh, I did.
I couldn't even help myself.
I sit home at night and I think, how can I
What
come
can
up with
I
lines
say?
to just to get Glinda felines?
I know, it's awesome. Love you.
I'm your straight guy.
Yes, you are. Are you really? I didn't know that about you. So,
We can just keep going on, you know.
I know, but I don't think they're here to see the Jim and Linda show. I think we should start down there, and everyone should say a little bit about themselves and their awesomeness.
Yes. All right. My name is Cynthia Ward. I mostly write science fiction and fantasy. I write some horror, crime, nonfiction. I'm probably best known for the nonfiction writing handbook, Writing the Other: Practical Approach, written with Nisi Shaw. I have a couple of short novels out. Adventure of the Dr. Lorem just came out last month. My debut in Analog magazine is in this month's issue, so I'm really excited.
And I just want to say, everybody who's writing should have Writing the Other, is that what it's called?
Yes.
Writing the Other in their bookcase, because it's valuable points on writing people other than yourself. Even I have that, because I'm not everybody.
Thank you very much, Linda.
I'm just saying.
Hi, I'm Janie Franz. I have 12 titles with Music Up Publishing. I'm the acquisition editor. I'm one of their content editors for the publisher. I also do proofreading for Fantasy Flight Games, RPG booklets. I also do academic editing and business ghostwriting. So I'm all over the map. And I'm going to put this right out here. This is a plotting panel. I'm a pantser, folks.
This is how to break the plotting.
And so, but I will throw in, when I write I do have a nonfiction title that I've got a psychologist to make sure that I'm not telling somebody the wrong thing, and he's going to write the preface for it. But that's about the only thing I'll write with an outline. Everything else, I know what's going to happen. It's just.
Well, we're going to get into all that kind of detail after we do our introductions. Because it sounds like you got something to say.
Yeah, take a few detours. There you go.
I'm Carolyn Kay. I primarily write steampunk fantasy, but I also do short stories in science fiction as well as a little bit of horror. So I have 2 novellas out in my shared world, Ashelon, that I work with on my husband. So, yeah, that's me.
Nice.
I'm Jim Doty. I write and publish under my initials JL Doty. I have 10 published novels that are a mix of self-published and traditionally published with Open Road Media, HarperCollins. I'm working on my 14th novel, and I'm anxiously awaiting the next rejection for my 12th and 13th novel. That's the life of a writer.
Yeah,
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So I'm Linda Addison. I have several collections out. I've won 4 Bram Stokers. and I was just given the Lifetime Achievement Award this year. I'm currently working on science fiction, so I'm doing a lot of science fiction. This book, How to Recognize the Demon Has Become Your Friend, is a collection of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. So it's my sort of everything book, and it won a Bram Stoker, so. So, do we need, okay, first of all, how many of you are writers? Just raise your hand. All right.
Like actual writers or wants to be writers?
If you're thinking, dreaming, and wanting to write, you're a writer, honey.
Exactly.
There's a difference between writer and published author, but you're a writer. So, do we need to go through the 7 plots because I did a one-word thing of each one, or do you guys feel okay? We just start talking about how to break it. Can it be broken?
I would like
Go
you
through
to,
it? Okay.
I'd like you to go through it too,
Okay.
because
I'm
I'm
just-
sure I know 7 of them, so that's cool.
In the beginning, and I've been writing for 40 years or more, I knew them by heart. Let me just say, when you know something, then you can break the rules. But if you don't know, and you inadvertently break the rules, then it just comes across broken. Okay, so the 7 plots are Overcoming the Monster, Rags to Riches, The Quest, Voyage and Return, Comedy, Tragedy, and Rebirth. And the basic approach that you'll see if you read about this is that every story becomes one of these things. Just like they say every story and movie has to have 3 acts, right? So I think the thing about this panel is, can you write without being, totally defined by one of these?
Someone said once, it wasn't me, but they said, there's 7 basic plots and Plato wrote them all. So,
They've all been done before.
Yeah.
What was number 3? 3 was The Quest.
Can you just read those again one time?
Sure, no problem. Because you can look them up. It's really good to know them, like I said, because then if you break it, at least you understand what you're doing. The first one is Overcoming the Monster. The second is Rags to Riches. The third is The Quest. The fourth is Voyage and Return. The fifth is Comedy. The sixth is Tragedy. And the 7th is Rebirth. And once you look at this and you leave this room, think about the books you've read. They probably fall into this. Movies you've seen probably fall into mixes of this. But, okay. Let it begin.
I might suggest that you might want to define comedy in this context, because you are probably talking about the theatrical.
Well, I think people
Shakespearean.
can look up the details, but I'll be happy if you want to bring that one up. I have the computer here, because like I said, I had this memorized in the beginning, like how to use commas and semicolons, and that was 40 years ago, so I had to look it up. The definition is light and humorous character with a happy or cheerful ending.
Right, because a lot of people I've found, when you say comedy, they're like, oh, I have to write
Make
like
jokes.
this ha-ha book with
No.
a stand-up comedian. No, it means something like a Shakespearean comedy or a sitcom comedy.
I mean, again, like she's saying, it says a dramatic work in which the central motif is the triumph over adverse circumstances, resulting in a successful or happy conclusion. So it doesn't have to be like someone doing jokes through the whole thing. It's not that.
Yeah, there may not be any
Yeah.
humor.
So what do y'all
But it may be
think?
comedy.
Well, there was a Writing Excuses. They did a whole season on essentially blending all of these different plot devices. Not only that, but genres as well. So I think you can mix and match those really well. You just have to know both of them. Whatever you're going to mix and match, you have to know it well enough to be able to blend it correctly.
Yeah, totally agree.
I think a lot of works, though, mix and match. It's hard to find, in good works nowadays that aren't a blend.
Right.
And I think everybody's doing that.
So I think we could probably agree that a blend can be done. But can you do something like let's take rags to riches, because I think most people would understand that it's the easiest one of the easiest ones to define. And the definition: the poor protagonist acquires power, wealth, and or a mate, loses it, gains it back, growing as a person as a result. So can you write something that's a rags to riches, but like not hit these points?
What about riches to rags?
You know, don't
Rich
ask
man,
me
poor
'cause
man.
I'm-
Oh.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what
Yeah, I think that would still fall in that because
I
it's just a
think, yeah,
different
You're just swapping it.
I think-
way of looking at the basic thing. But can you have something like this where they go through that whole thing but they don't grow at the end? Is that an acceptable thing?
I would think that all the variations would be acceptable. There's some people get money and they don't seem to learn anything. I've seen that in the real world.
But if you write that, would that be satisfying? If you made that movie, would
I-
that be
I-
satisfying to the reader, to the audience?
I think it's like any rule. You can do whatever you want, but you better do it well.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
have
know,
a
you can
reason.
break all the rules, but know the rules before you break them, and
You
you know,
must-
just be.
What if
Oh,
you
so
redefine
you have to do it
riches?
well.
Yeah, you
Sorry?
must do it.
What if you redefine riches?
Truly.
Like Siddhartha? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with that. So, hi. You have such a wealth of background in the different areas. Have you read something where someone left out one of the big things and it was still?
I think everybody's done these. I mean, I've done them, although I'm sitting there, while you were going through them, trying to figure out, I've got fantasy, I've got paranormal romance, I've got thrillers, I've got all this, and I've got a new police procedural I'm thinking about doing. But it's going to fit one of these. I mean, I'm sitting there trying to figure out, okay, what was this one about? How would it have fit here? My Lost Song trilogy definitely is a quest.
But what if you know this and you decide to leave it out? And the reason I'm bringing this up is that I just had a conversation with Wes. Please ask him about this because I didn't know. It was awesome. And he was saying how a director who did not do the 3 acts, he only did the first 2 acts, and this is another great thing as a writer, even if you don't do movies, the 3-act thing, and I don't have a definition, we're not going to talk about, that's not this, but please do look it up, because books and stories can also run around the 3 acts.
Yeah.
And probably someone here knows them by heart, but he did a movie and left out the last act and got a lot of crap in Hollywood over that. Like, he was not,
Well, yeah.
that was not acceptable.
You want some sort of resolution. That's what the 3rd act is about. Either it's the climax and then you figure out what happens next. It all builds up to this.
But he did it without that.
I know.
I'm pretty sure he knew what he was doing.
Of course he did.
But at the same time, Hollywood is just notorious for
Breaking rules.
demanding formulaic performance.
Yeah.
Let's have another crash bang.
good
Let's
guys
take
always gotta win.
Rocky 47 is about to come out tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I want this gentleman here to say something.
Does human nature demand personal growth at the end of what you're writing? So I think that is the absolute taboo, right? You can't.
That's
have
the
a
biggest
plot
thing, yes, because
that
it is a
doesn't
very
show
human thing to want that happy ending or have that resolve.
So even if it's not happy ending, it has to
Something.
be some kind of
Revelation that happens.
enrichment of the main character.
In horror, the resolution is often frequently not happy, but
Indeed.
but it has to have a resolution.
Right,
So maybe resolution's a better term for,
right.
if it's an
But
unresolved plot, people really are disturbed.
And I think
Yeah.
that's really the
Yes.
point of what we're talking about, is that how is the reader and audience going to feel if you don't hit some satisfying point of going through these different 7 things? Yes, sir.
The only thing I can think of where you have books that kind of go outside of this would be like absurdist books. But
Yeah.
those aren't really done as much nowadays, to my knowledge. Like, is that something that's kind of like a lost art, or like something that set in time, a time and place where it's
You guys
done?
again?
Well, I think, that's in literary fiction. I think there's still probably a place for that. But for a general audience, I think people want to find, they go to the movies or they read a book to have an experience. And you hope that you learn something too during that experience, because that's one of the best things I loved about reading science fiction as a young person was I learned about things through the story. And I hope I do that a little bit with my fantasy as I learn about things through the story.
Did you say absurdist books?
Yes.
Is that what
Yes.
you think? I'm thinking of something like something satire, something like Lord of the Rings by John Belushi and company, written in the 70s, you know, and that's not really fiction. That is, in a sense, it's kind of like a stand-up comedy routine. It's comedy.
Are
It's
you
not
thinking of like
Camus.
Paraboo?
Say that again. I didn't hear what you.
I was thinking more like Camus, which, you know,
Okay,
it
yeah,
is.
right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where I was thinking.
Yeah.
All right. All right. I was
Oh, I was
up in left
thinking
field then.
I was thinking of the
Metamorphosis and all
Dada-esque,
that art and all that.
the Dada-esque fiction where it just basically is all about like how can another random strange thing happen. It wouldn't necessarily fit that well to these 7 types of plots.
Yes, ma'am.
On the 3-act structure thing, recently I've been listening to a lot of old folk tales, and most of them are structured like things happen, and then it suddenly stops.
Resolve. Oh, suddenly stops without the result.
It'll have like one paragraph conclusion, and they were so happy, you know, and if it's not for this, they'd probably still be dancing to this day. Usually it's they get a wife, and then it stops.
Okay.
Some of them do follow start of the book, you know, start of the story, middle of the story,
Stuff happens.
end of the
resolve.
story. But usually there is a conclusion, but it kind of just starts with one sentence, and it's basically stuff happens, and then there's a conclusion. And I'm thinking that, and you know, the folk tales that came closer to our actual time follow the 3-act structure a little bit more.
My feeling, and I'll get to you in a minute. My feeling about that is that it's written so that the reader has to come to the resolve. It's written to create a moment for the reader to go to make that next step. And then, because in general, as a society, we like to have a happy ending. Like when I see a movie without a happy ending, I'm like, wow, I'm impressed, because that is not acceptable. But my feeling is with that is that the idea is because folk tales are to teach. That's the whole point. They're to teach children. They're to pass on rules of the society. That's the whole point of no matter what continent it's on. So I think that idea, yes ma'am.
I had an experience in a reading group, and it was a science fiction, but it was about a war, a big dynasty, and the dynasty won, and so the people who lost were kind of exiled. And then they spent the whole book, it was the second book, they spent the whole book getting ready, and then they were going to have another war. It looked like, well, maybe they're going to win this time and throw out the dynasty. They had a big party, everybody got drunk on both sides, and that was the end of the book. And a lot of the people in our group thought it was okay, and I was like,
That sounds more like my college years.
I'm not sure about
There's no resolution to that.
I'm not sure about that
I was
myself.
like, well, what did they win the war? What happened?
I thought you were going to say then one side got the other drunk.
That's what I thought. That's where I thought that was going.
They got
Like
better.
Troy,
Killed
you
them all,
know.
and they got the other side.
They got it drunk, they
and
pushed in the
up.
wood horse, everybody got on the horse and beat him up, but
But I was a pretty big guy, wasn't it?
But weren't you frustrated more by, again, it's the lack of resolution?
Yes,
Yes,
I was very
yes.
frustrated.
I think that's kind
but
of
the other
fun.
people in the group weren't.
I think that's kind of fundamental to a story arc, you know.
Yeah. Well, I know one
And
of
that's
the,
probably, I think possibly that's the one element you can't leave out.
I think one of the things that I found too, when I first started writing, I got with this series, I was with another publisher, and I got lumped into the romance category. I do not write romance, okay?
I wish I did, because that's some money.
Oh, I know. But I do write about relationships, okay? But mine are, you in the book, and there's a big shoe waiting to just drop into things. And by the second book, it's like, well, yeah, that did happen. Let's find out where the next big shoe is. But I had people say to me, you don't write romance. No, I don't write romance. But your endings end, and, there is resolution, but there always is that something. And I think it's probably because it's life. We have resolution to a point, but we don't have total resolution, because
Real
if we
life,
did,
we don't. Real life, we
yeah,
don't.
if we did, we'd all be going to heaven then, or to hell, or wherever we're going to end up, because it's been done.
Closure is a myth.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
Back there.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask her the novel that ended with Barney. Was that like the second book of the trilogy?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, I don't know if it was a trilogy, but I think it was a
Or a
big
second
writer.
book.
But what I was surprised at was the whole group thought it was okay.
Again, you know what? Everything is so subjective.
I guess.
You know, because for them, perhaps there was some resolution emotionally that you did not come to naturally, like you were talking about folks' tales in the beginning that didn't have the end. Because when a reader reads your work, they're emotionally getting plugged in with their own needs and wants and desires and unresolved things, and some people will work through that and some don't.
But he brought up a good point. If it was like this. The first or second book in a
That is
trilogy.
a good point.
There's the whole thing of the cliffhanger, and that's completely different from
Right.
lack of
Which
resolution.
is a pause sometimes.
Yeah.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
Which can be annoying.
Yeah.
I think of it as an inexperienced writer, is like, because they want you to get the third book or the second book.
What do you think about
And
that?
I think there should be some sort of independent, full story in the book that they.
Yeah.
I would agree something should tie off, because when I've
Right.
read books that just come to a cold stop and it's like, look, a cliffhanger, I have never read the next book or the rest of the series.
Because you mad, okay?
I can think of.
It's like hitting a wall, you know, because you think something's gonna. I don't expect. I understand cliffhangers, and I've seen Perils of Pauline when I was a kid, and they used to still show serials of the movies. But it's like a cold stop for everything.
And then
And then
Netflix
you've
will
got
do
to
that with their
wait.
series. They'll resolve a little bit in each episode, but you don't get the big
But
result.
Overall, an overarching story doesn't end until that third.
But see, I almost did that one time, and I left a book in the middle of a series with a big cliffhanger, and I didn't like it. And so I went back, and what I did was I did have some serious resolution to some of the issues in the story,
Yes.
and then it was kind of my instincts were saying, no, I can't do it this way.
It feels manipulative.
So I had some serious resolution, and then the cliffhanger was almost like an epilogue, where one big plot element kind of was setting up the next book.
Yeah, to me, it's kind of an
Serial
issue
would
of
be
trust,
different, 'cause they're little
where I
kids.
have trusted you through hundreds of pages.
Yeah.
Oh
And
dear.
you know,
No,
and
I
I
totally
and I
am
just
with you.
I had a map. I drove along in my car. You increased the pace so that my car sped up, and then I ran into a wall. And it's kind of like, I know you're a good writer, but I just don't want to hit a
And
wall.
I think that's why people have, and I think again, it's a very human need. No matter where you grew up on this planet, it's a very human need to go through a story and want resolve, even if we live in our lives without it. We want it.
But you mentioned a very important word in that. You said the pace. And I think the pace creates an expectation. And if the pace near the end of the third book is creating an expectation for some serious resolution, then the cliffhanger is disappointing. But if your pace is that this is still going to be going on, you haven't set up an unrealized expectation.
Yes, the pace will hit things. Everything is going to full speed
Your
ahead in the sense that
expectation.
everything is going to come together, or most things are going to come together in some way, even if there's a sequel book. But if you just hit a wall on every plot and subplot and thread, it's just kind of and occasionally this happens because the author finds that the publisher has cut the book in half.
Yeah.
And the author can't do anything about it at that point, and
That's
I
not quite-
think
or
that's
they-
horrible of the
They
publisher to
canceled
do
the
that.
series
Or-
before they
It
had
has
the
been known to happen. Yes, sir.
I was just gonna say, I think the perfect example of doing the pace even when things are going really fast is the end of The Empire Strikes Back. Because you're left with things going really fast, and if it would have stopped 5 minutes earlier, then it would have been that wall.
Yeah.
There would have still had to been more story, but they're like, we gotta throw in a little bit of a
hope.
And I think that is, again, if you're writing a series, I look at it like chains, like you're creating a chain, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think you want everything to resolve in the first book. Otherwise, why would someone read the second book? I'm not I've done a lot of poetry and short stories, and that's where I've made my name. But now I'm moving into novels, and I'm finishing up one book now in science fiction. But I have a 3-book sci-fi series trilogy that I'm working on. I did 1.5 books. What I found, and I didn't design this ahead of time. I don't design. I write very organically. And if you write, I would say take these 7 things and look at what you've done. You find that you often are doing it anyway. But what I found in the 3 books is that the first one is a coming of age. The second one is a so-and-so. The last one is a return. And I didn't plan that. But what happens at the end of each of those 3 is that I resolve to some enough degree, I hope, you will be a judge, the coming of age story, but leave something in there to indicate that there is another journey that's going to happen in the second book. But the coming of age one that has been going on does come to some point.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Empire Strikes Back was the second in that first trilogy. And I see it very commonly in trilogies that's been going on for about 20, 30 years now, 40 years, where the first book has a lot more resolution near the end, but doesn't resolve the whole plot. And then the second book very commonly has much less resolution going into the third book. And books are doing that, and they did that.
You think that's like a natural?
I see it just commonly. It's not uncommon. And Star Wars, that first trilogy, which was the second in the sequence because the first one really happened before. I'm all confused now, but you know what I mean.
He knew all 6 books when he did those. He knew what all 6
but they
of
commonly,
those were
I see that really commonly in I think even the publisher, when they broke up Tolkien's book into 3 books, found a way of kind of doing that at the end of the second book. It left you with. There was more resolution at the end of the first book, not complete resolution. Then the second book really left you with kind of more of a cliffhanger. And so I think that's not an uncommon theme.
That's interesting.
In the last 30 or 40 years, where the second book does have less resolution and more of a cliffhanger.
There's kind of a lot of people think that in trilogies the second books are often, they're kind of a bridge and they can be kind of saggy. And there's, I've heard the expression second book doldrums.
I really want to avoid that real bad. Thank you guys for bringing that up. Yes, ma'am.
For me, I tend to enjoy works much more when they do break rules or at least bend them nicely. But like you were saying, with the pace, it's giving you certain expectations. You can fiddle around with standards and break all the rules you want, but there needs to be something in there, kind of like the shotgun on the mantelpiece. Even if I don't recognize it when I first read it, something that's going to linger in the back of my brain to tell me that this is going to get broken, or that it's going to be an abrupt end and I'm going to have to buy the next book. Or if you can set me up from the beginning so it's not such a shock.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of writing, is finding out how you're doing that pacing and how you're going to resolve. I'll give you an example. I just was a second editor-reader for 600 stories. Okay? Yeah. So, oh my gosh. So when I finished it, I came up, and I'm sorry I didn't bring, I might have it on here. I came up with 8 things to look at my stories when I go back, because my first book is science fiction, is linked stories in the same universe, whatever. Because what I found were these kinds of things. One, the pacing would be like, the first paragraph would be great, boom, we're in, and then there's a 5-page
exposition.
Look back.
Flashback.
You know what? No. Okay. So then the ones that got me were the ones that were beautiful, pacing, writing all the way through, and then at the end, what? No. I mean, there's just some things, and like I said, I put them on my Facebook page, but I have them in my little checklist when I rewrite to make sure my stories don't do that, because it's really important.
I was
Slashing up more and more and more, and
you could do a flashback, but it's got to be short and it's got to have energy.
Yeah, and even the really bizarre movies that the entire thing is nothing but time jumps here and there and everywhere. Again, I'm okay with that, but let me know it's coming, or do the movie that way. Don't promise me you're going to give me this beautiful linear thing and then suddenly say,
exactly.
I have become very I don't do too many flashbacks, but I've become very conscious of when you do one and making it a really obvious transition, so that because I hate it when I'm wait, I'm confused now. I thought we were, and I really dislike that, and you should never have the reader thinking, I'm confused.
Right.
You're dropping them out of the story. So
Yeah.
I've become very conscious of when when I'm going to do a flashback, and I don't do too many of them, make the transition really obvious for the reader so that they're comfortable knowing. Maybe he's standing at the window and he thought back to that day 9 years ago. Scene break. You kind of set it up. That kind of thing helps the reader in it, and I think it's very important.
I have some.
Let me tell you this one. Could everyone talk about flashbacks? Because I think this is really important. I love what you
Flashback
just
is
said.
very important, and I do have
Your
some
approach.
observations on it. Years ago, I took a course from the agent and also writer Donald Moss, which is about writing the breakout novel, and he talks about
that's a great
things
book.
you should not do if you want to write a breakout novel. Don't do this in any novel. It's don't do this in a breakout novel. But one of the things he says is like, don't do flashbacks, or at least don't do them at the beginning, because he made the point in a movie when there's a flashback, everything tells you. The lighting changes. You're in you go from a room to the top of the Grand Canyon, or different characters, or at least some different characters. Everything in a movie will tell you it's a flashback, and people are very sophisticated now at following that, even if there's a lot of them. Like, most people can follow Quentin Tarantino. Timelines are completely chopped up and remixed. But in a book, what happens, and if you start reading for this, which I did after hearing this and taking this class, if you start reading books and stories, and a flashback happens, like right away, or like in the first chapter, maybe the first few chapters, it does slow you down. His point was not that flashbacks are bad. It was, in a breakout novel, especially at the beginning, do not have a flashback because somebody has just come into your book, they're trying to figure out where they are, and then you pull the rug out from under them and you're in a different place, maybe with all completely different characters, and the readers slow down because they have to stop. They basically stop.
You never want them to slow down.
They have to stop to figure out what the hell is going on now. This is different. And then when you come out of that,
to the letter, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and then you come out of it, and then the reader, again, because they're not watching a movie, they have to completely reorient again. So they should, I'm not saying don't use them, I'm saying use flashbacks in prose very carefully, because they're the only cues people have, and you're right, they need to be crystal clear, because it's so we think our writing is obvious, and then when I was accepted at I was accepted at Clarion West 92, and I thought my fiction is so obvious, that's what I'm going to be critiqued for. And what I heard over and over again is that I don't know what's going on.
And that happens. What do you guys have anything else to add to this flashback? How to do it well, how not to do it well?
I only used one flashback in one of my books, and now that I think about it, I probably shouldn't have done it. But
is the book published?
Yes.
All right, then.
It was okay then.
Move on. That's what I say. Leave the past to the past. It's out there next time.
I bought it, and I wrote 2 more books. It wasn't one of these. It was my one of my other series. But I was young. This was an old manuscript that I updated, and it launched the rest of the series with it. But
sometimes you need them. I mean, I have things these are short novels or novellas. I have things where she thinks back to something.
It can be done
necessary
well.
and then come
forward
in time.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I don't necessarily do flashbacks. I'll do callbacks, especially like in the second book in a series. You kind of do have to call back to the first one just to kind of remind the reader about something. Yeah, but I try and keep them super short. And like a simple reference to my main character ends up in the middle of an airship battle in the first book, and so which really impacts her going into the second one, and so that I call back to that, but I don't give a full flashback. I'll do a little bit like because she has PTSD, so for her she actually does get a flashback, but I try and frame it in the point of
so it's consistent with the characters,
right?
Emotional.
So her vision goes red, and all she can hear is the roar of a cannonball in her ear. That kind of stuff, but I don't literally relive that whole scene again. I just give the little snippets that really kind of impact her. So
sounds like a good way to go. Just a second.
I was just wondering with like the opening scene and then flashback. I'm wondering if that isn't a lazy editor or writer who really wanted to start the book where they wanted to start it, but the editor said, "Oh no, you have to start on an action scene, and we have to move that kind of."
Well, here's what I think is the rule in general, and like I said, you can break a rule if you know the rule. You do have to start and get the person's attention, and I can tell you this from reading 600 stories. Like, I was
But
like,
it doesn't have to be an action scene.
no, but it has to be something that emotionally grabs the person.
Right.
It can even be the language. It can be a dialogue, but the language, the first line the character says as the story opens, pulls you right in.
Right.
The thing is that what I found is that yes, you can do flashbacks, but you gotta know what you're doing, and you gotta do it with energy, and it can't be long. And in fact, I will say again, the book that she mentioned, I have that book.
Writing the breakout novel.
Writing the breakout novel, really good book to read. And again, I'm not one to live by rules, so I'm not going to say you shouldn't have a flashback on the first page. I have read some stories in the 600 batch that did have a flashback on the first page, but it was handled in a beautiful way that didn't throw me out of it. It probably was maybe more of a callback. I actually never heard that term. So,
But there is a tendency to want to do that, and I think every book I've ever written, I had a flashback on the first page, and every book I've ever written, I eliminated it and made it a more linear thing. You know, I think there is a kind of a laziness. You're getting in there, and I need some backstory, and so I'll flashback real quick, and then long before I get to the final edit, I've expunged those.
yeah, I just think you have to have enough in the beginning to keep the reader involved. Then if you decide to flash back, they already are in it. Right? So you can flashback, but don't let that flashback slow down. Because let me tell you, out of 600, if that flashback slowed down, no. I mean, I wasn't the final vote. There were a bunch of people reading, but.
I have always been told if you have to have a flashback, no more than 3 short paragraphs. I mean, do you feel
that's a lot, yes.
No more than
that's
what?
A lot.
I'm sorry.
Three short paragraphs. That's a lot. I'm thinking one, but two.
The one I was referring to, it was a very important flashback, and it was the beginning of the fourth and final book in a series. And the villain, there's kind of it's almost a prologue. It's like 3 or 4 pages at the beginning of the book where he is standing at a window in this castle, and he's looking down, and his mother is tending the flowers at his brother's graves. And this sets up a whole bunch of backstory that was hinted at through the first 3 books. And he then recalls the day 15 years earlier when he murdered that brother, that his mother is tending the flowers at the grave. Now scene break. And then I go into a whole chapter where you see the whole setup for this very evil murder that he does. But that was only worked because it was the first chapter in the 4th book of the series. And by then, this was a key element where I was filling in a bunch of stuff that I hinted at.
I can see that. By the way, just to say this, I don't think this is the flashback panel. But I appreciate all this good stuff. I'm writing down notes. Can we? I know we got it's 11:41. We got to be out here 11:55. Do we have any opinion on whether you can break these plot things or you have to work by them? Dude, you're not even on the panel. But go ahead.
I did a historical novel, but what happened is you transition in time from the history that's involved to the person that's fighting what that history brought on. But each chapter is headed with the time and where it occurs.
That's really useful when you're doing that kind of structure.
Yeah, so if we're in 1943, there's a scene that happens in 1943 that opens, and then you transition to where this guy is now haunted by what he did. And the story is really about overcoming the demons that were created at that time.
Well, this is an excellent structure, and also the same thing if your book is 4 characters. I just read, I'm gonna mess up his name so bad. I'm sorry. Gabino is
Iglesias.
Thank you. He has a new book out called Coyote Songs, which I read in blurb. I think every human being on this planet, especially this country, should read it. But it's not about animal coyotes. It's about the coyotes, the people who bring people from Mexico in these trucks. I mean, this book broke me in places I didn't even know could be broken. But it put me back together again.
Yeah.
But he goes through like 4 or 5 characters. Each chapter, if it's whatever character is named for that character. So you're never lost when you go in. You don't have to guess with the first line. So I think structure is really important as far as keeping the reader involved. But what do we think? Can you break the plot thing?
Again, I say what I said earlier.
As you
Do
say,
anything
if
want
you
if do
know
it
the rules well enough,
Yeah. But I think we're all going to, absorb some of this as we write.
Truly.
And it depends on, structure, however you do it. Sometimes there are prologues that are necessary that happened in the past, like in 1943. That's a whole chapter by itself. Then you go to what's happening now and why that is important. And I think, I was talking earlier, plotter, plan, outliners, pantsers, I looked at this as people who write outlines can sometimes go directly through the outline, or they can write scenes. It's kind of like filming a movie. You film whatever, when the light's good, or when you can get the crew here for that, so you can write those things. I'm more like a stage actress as I write, because I found out that when I've done community theater, if it starts out wrong at the beginning, it's going to go awful at the end, because the pacing just isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and
that's so important.
The third book in here, there was a scene I wanted to write so badly. Oh, I have to write this, and I said, no, you can't.
Well, you could write and save it in a file somewhere.
Well, no. Well, this is what happened, because it's about that pacing. Because of all of the things and the nature of the characters that happened before, when I got to that scene, it was about that, but the energy about the scene was very, very different. And that was a big lesson to me, because then I realized this is my process. This is how I have to do it. And I think when we plot, we have an idea where it's going to go, whether we're a pantser or we write an outline, and we're going to use some of these elements, and we're going to twist it.
But I think it's subconscious, as you're saying. I mean, I'm not going to say for everybody, but I think it can be subconscious, because it is a natural way for people. I love to experiment, so I will go and do something different, just because I want to see if I can.
You think it's all readers' trust, though? So if you're consistent in breaking the plot, as long as the reader trusts that you're following that reality
and that has to do with
consistency, I think I would go along. But I've read a bunch of books where they try to switch it up halfway through, or it's not consistent, or the ending falls out.
And you're thrown out, and you're like, no.
Yeah. But I think that all comes down to, I don't think it's an issue of breaking those plot rules. It's an issue of breaking the rules of good writing. You maintain pace, and your pace sets an expectation in the reader for what's going to come next. And so if you're going to shift, you need to shift the pace. You need to shift all sorts of things, the reader's expectations. You need to guide them into the fact that you're going to break it. And that's where I think we make mistakes. It's not breaking the rules of the plot structure. It's breaking the rules of good storytelling and good writing.
Absolutely.
Where we screw up.
Absolutely.
And, so I think you can break all those rules, but you don't get to make sudden transitions in pace unless you planned on it and there's a good reason for that.
And you do it well.
But you have to pace readers' expectations. Setting up flashbacks, all these things are what make it possible for you.
And I think that as a writer, again, it's really important to read about the basis of these things.
Right.
Because, like I said, I've been doing this for over 40 years. This short story collection that I'm writing now, I have no idea when I started each story how it was going to end. I had no idea. This is the first time I've ever done this. I just sat down and it came out. Why? I think because of 40 years of writing, subconsciously, it's just coming like a song through my brain. And now I'm almost 95% done. And these stories are all intertwined. I'm honestly not going to ever be able to explain how that happened. But again, it's because I've read so much, and I continue to. I'm always trying to learn. I'm always trying to get better. So I think I don't really believe you should read one of these and say, oh, I'm going to write a quest thing, read the rules and write it. I think you should write and then read and look at how it comes together with what you've written. Exactly. And learn these things and let it become a subconscious thing, because I think it is a very human-based need to tell a story, to have a resolve, to have someone go through a hard-ass time and then get better. Things get better. I mean, that's a very human kind of system. I think that's why these things even became defined. Yes?
And I think we've seen a trend of people saying, you know what, no, I want the story to be resolved. I want some kind of actual plot. In literary fiction, in the past 20, 30 years, a lot of literary fiction has essentially just been character studies, or, there's no real resolution, often there's no real plot. And the books that are bestsellers right now are technically genre books. The Gone Girl.
I like how you think.
The Martian.
I want that to be so true.
Is sci-fi. Yeah. And I think part of the reason, and the genre people are going, yeah, those are good. And the literary fiction people are going, oh, this is the best thing ever. Well, because it has a story.
It has a story, that's exactly right.
I will admit, I am really biased against literary fiction. I do not like modern literary fiction for the most part. But I think that it's been kind of a cool trend that, you know what, we tried this experiment where we didn't follow the rules, and we want the rules to be followed.
I consider myself really ignorant because I pick up modern literary fiction and I go, wow, I'm bored.
And I've also seen
something wrong with it. I know there's something wrong with it.
Yeah, people coming out of MFA programs, often sound like everybody's writing the same thing. And, because I used to read a lot of literature in the New Yorker and
I still do, and I often get to that no point.
And it's like, okay, why did I just waste, all this time reading this?
Yeah, it's done so subtly. I think that there are people who are getting something out of it, but I'm not that kind of reader. I mean, Raymond Carver is everybody's and he does. This is not a put down of Raymond Carver, who was an excellent writer, but I would read them and I would be and my boyfriend is a big fan of his, and I know a lot of science fiction writers. I love him. I've learned so much from him. But so many of his endings, I'm to me, it just seems to stop. I don't have the key to whatever is giving orgasms.
But your life is not fortune to that. I know, it's subjective. Listen, we got 5 minutes left. I would like, if you were to, because I know I got something to say, if you would like to take a minute or so and say what your next great project is that people should know about.
Oh, well, I guess the Dux Bellorum just came out, so I'm kind of on a down cycle here, but it actually got a starter Publishers Weekly. I can't believe it. It just came out.
That's kind of something you can't buy.
I am planning 2 more books in the series, but my publisher currently isn't taking manuscripts in, so I can't give it to them till they open again. But eventually there will be 2 more in this series about Dracula's dumpier, half vampire, half human daughter and her adventures. They're mashups if you've seen or read The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or the Walt Newton books of Philip Jose Farmer, it's that kind of thing. So Dracula's daughter has a relationship with the Countess Karnstein, better known as the vampiress Carmilla, and the War of the Worlds technology and so forth. So I think they're fun pulp adventures, and this has been out a while, but Linda has already spoken on it.
And everywhere I go.
Oh, I should mention I have a couple for sale, and David Lee Summers is selling. He has more copies for sale.
Okay, that's your minute. Soon. Next. I'm the oldest of 9. I'm sorry. I can't help
Yes, for you. Yes, ma'am. I have a book just out in September. It's the 3rd book in my Ruins series, which is paranormal archaeology romance thriller kind of thing.
Oh boy.
It's in your program. They're digital. If you get that one, you can get the first book that does have the flashback for 99
That's
cents.
That's not a curse word, as long as you do it right.
For 99 cents. I'm currently researching the 4th book in that Ruin series, and it will also spark a spinoff, which is my police procedure, paranormal police procedural that I'll be doing with that one, which is about an Apache female lawyer in the police area.
Girl, I need your imagination. I like all that stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I'm currently trying to finish up a Time Warp novel about going into the future that's actually feudal society. And then I have a series I've started that's my paranormal cozy mysteries, which is about an 80-year-old Earth woman from Tennessee who goes to North Dakota to fight the baddies, and you can't use garlic and that sort of thing. I am a crazy woman. I'm telling you, I am.
Girl, you are so busy. Yes.
Nice. I'm finishing up the 3rd book in my Gallisol Tales trilogy. Hopefully that'll be out early next year. And then I will be embarking on a 4-book, 4-author co-written series about Oriental steampunk.
Excellent.
Yes.
Wiggle.
Yes. Okay.
I'm working on the 2nd book in the Black Sword Regiment, which is hard science fiction. I'm working on the 2nd book in the Valley of Bones series, which is a fantasy set in a Georgian setting. It's subtitled The Witch of Valdosa, Her Apprentice, the Thief, and the Harlot.
Nice title.
I'm working on the 3rd book in the Treason cycle, which is dark, hard science fiction. And I follow John Voorhees' rules. Just keep having the Klingons bust through the doors with phasers. I don't have any Klingons in it.
So mine is real simple. Right now, there is a GoFund building for a film that started yesterday, filming of a script that was inspired by a poem that I wrote. I know, right?
Wow.
And it's called, I know, come on now. And it's called Morning, the poem is called Morning Meal, morning as morning lost, not Good Morning America. And the movie it's a short film. So, if you got $5, just saying, on my site, Linda Addison Poet, hook me up.
What's the name of the film? Is it
Morning Meal.
MEAL?
Yeah, like eating.
Morning. You said GoFundMe. It's a GoFundMe.
Yes.
Thank you.
But you can also you can find it in GoFundMe, or you can go to my site, Linda Addison Poet, and there'll be a link. Please. It started yesterday, and the person doing it is an amazing, award-winning producer, and he did this script that's actually won awards already, so come on now. Join the team! Okay, that's it. Thank you, guys! Thank you. All right.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. And feel free to enjoy our other shows, such as D&D Journey of the 5th Edition, and Scion Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion hero to Ragnarok story. Thank you for listening.
Oh, and we have cards and bookmarks and, I have a collector's card, yeah. Who's the her winning poet that has a collector's card? Who's that?